Chapter 1. Frozen in the Void. The Zephyr's echo drifted silently through the cold vacuum of an uncharted sector, a ghost among the scattered remnants of forgotten stars. Once a proud vessel of exploration and hope, it was now a shattered husk, crippled by the violence of a war that had long since faded from the headlines of the galactic core. The ship's hull bore scars of countless micrometeor impacts and energy blasts, its sleek curves fractured and twisted. Inside the dimly lit corridors, life support flickered sporadically, an unsteady heartbeat in a metal corpse. At the very edge of this cold tomb, beneath the shattered dome of the observation deck where stars once glittered like jewels in the endless night, a tiny figure lay curled against the frosted floor. Her fragile body, no larger than a human toddler's, was wrapped in tattered remnants of thermal cloth, threadbare and useless against the creeping chill that invaded every inch of the starship's carcass. She was a Clitheriae species of lithe, ethereal beings from the jungle worlds of the Zinther system, their skin usually a vibrant coral pink, their veins glowing faintly with bioluminescent light. But now, her skin had turned a pale, chilling blue, the unmistakable sign of hypothermia's cruel grip. Each breath she drew was shallow and ragged, a soft fog escaping from her cracked lips into the icy air, her body trembling uncontrollably despite the feeble shield of worn fabric around her. The once lively sounds of the ship, a hum of engines, the soft murmur of communications, the rhythmic pulse of life support had long since faded, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the faint groans of stressed metal and the distant thrum of the cosmos beyond. Time had become meaningless here, measured only in the slow, fading beat of a tiny heart struggling against the cold and the void. She had been left here, abandoned like refuse, cast aside by those who had once promised protection and shelter. The war that had torn apart her homeworld had left survivors scattered and fractured, their spirits broken, their families lost. She was one of the youngest survivors, a fragile ember in a galaxy that had forgotten how to nurture such sparks. Outside, the endless blackness of space stretched infinitely, indifferent to her suffering. Stars twinkled cold and distant, their ancient light journeying across the void, untouched by the drama unfolding within this dying vessel. The frozen silence was oppressive, but within it, the girl's consciousness flickered like a dying candle, wavering between faint hope and creeping despair. Memories of a lush jungle world haunted her fading mind, vast canopies of shimmering leaves, the gentle rustle of glowing fauna, the warm embrace of sunlight filtering through thick foliage. Those images were now as distant and unreachable as the stars themselves. Her tiny fingers twitched weakly, reaching toward the shattered glass of the observation dome above. As if desperate to touch the stars, she could no longer see clearly through the frost. Each movement was labored, draining the last reserves of strength from her frail body. She tried to recall the warmth of her mother's embrace, the scent of the earth after rain, but those memories were fragmented and fading. She was cold-bone chillingly cold, and the ice was creeping into her very soul. Despite the ship's failing systems, a flicker of life remained an emergency beacon, a faint pulse of radio frequency, sending a silent plea into the void. It was a whisper in the cosmic storm, a last desperate call for rescue. But rescue was a distant dream. In this forgotten corner of space, few ships passed, and even fewer cared. The war had rendered the galaxy ruthless, and this tiny life was considered expendable, a casualty of countless battles fought in shadowed corridors and star-streaked skies. As her body convulsed in the grasp of the cold, a single tear traced a frozen path down her cheek, glittering in the dim emergency lights. Her breath came in short gasps, each one weaker than the last. The luminescent glow of her veins, once a beacon of vitality and life, flickered erratically before dimming into near oblivion. It was a painful surrender to the inevitable, the slow fading of a life not yet fully begun. Yet, within the fragile walls of her heart, a stubborn ember refused to die, a flicker of willpower that defied the void's cruel grasp. Far away, in the crowded and bustling starport of Tarsus Prime, a human named Jalen was returning from a routine salvage mission. His ship, the Endeavor, was small and rugged, built for resilience rather than speed or luxury. Jalen himself was a man marked by hardship and resilience, a mechanic and pilot hardened by years navigating the unforgiving fringes of explored space. His face was lined with the dust of distant worlds, his hands calloused from endless repairs and modifications. Yet beneath the grit and exhaustion, there was an unyielding kindness, a determination to protect and nurture, no matter the cost. As he calibrated his sensors to scan a derelict nearby, a faint anomaly caught his attention, a weak signal pulsing faintly amidst the background noise of the cosmos. His brow furrowed in curiosity. The signal was faint, irregular, almost like a heartbeat hidden in the static. Compelled by a mixture of professional duty and a lingering hope, Jalen altered course, his ship sliding silently through the void toward the source. The closer he approached, the more distinct the signal became, revealing itself as a life sign, fragile, desperate, but undeniably alive. His heart quickened. Few would risk themselves to answer such calls anymore, but for Jalen, it was instinctual. He remembered the stories of lost children in the war zones, the orphans abandoned and left to perish in the cold reaches of space. His own childhood had been shaped by loss and survival. The memory of those he had failed to save haunted him still. The airlock hissed open as Jalen stepped into the ghostly corridors of the Zephyr's Echo. His boots echoed softly against the cracked metal floors, the scent of burnt circuitry and dust filling his nostrils. He activated his portable life detector, which pulsed rapidly, leading him through winding hallways choked with debris and silence. In the observation deck, beneath the shattered glass, the faintest warmth remained in the form of a feeble glow, a tiny body curled in a ball, blue and trembling. Without hesitation, Jalen knelt beside her, pulling his thermal blanket from his pack and wrapping her fragile frame, with care born of years tending the injured and broken. His hands were steady but gentle, fingers trembling slightly as he touched her icy skin, feeling the rapid, shallow pulse beneath. She was beyond fragile, slipping perilously close to death's edge, yet alive. He murmured words of comfort, old earth lullabies learned in childhood, letting the warmth of his voice fill the cold silence. With painstaking patience, he activated the emergency heaters he carried, directing their soft glow to her frozen limbs. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the icy blue began to retreat from her skin, replaced by a faint, returning blush. The bioluminescence in her veins flickered back to life, a delicate glow spreading beneath translucent skin like the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness. In that moment, a fragile bond was forged between two disparate beings, a human, hardened by years of solitude and hardship, and a tiny alien girl, nearly lost to the cold emptiness of space. Jalen's determination to protect her was fueled by more than duty. It was a spark of compassion that refused to be extinguished by the indifferent galaxy. She was no longer alone, no longer forgotten. In his arms, the blue began to fade, replaced by the promise of warmth and hope, the promise of a future yet to be written. Jalen's breath came in steady rhythms as he gently lifted the tiny girl into his arms, cradling her fragile form against the protective warmth of his jacket. The emergency heaters hummed softly, pushing gentle waves of heat into the frozen air around them. But it was the human warmth, his heartbeat, the pulse of life beneath his skin that she needed most. Her icy fingers twitched weakly against his palm, a faint spark of recognition flickering in her clouded eyes. Through layers of frost and fatigue, there was a glimmer of trust beginning to form, a fragile lifeline stretching across species and worlds. His mind raced with questions even as he acted on instinct. How long had she been alone in this drifting coffin? How many times had she been cast away, labeled too weak, too broken to save? The galaxy had become a brutal place, its conflicts leaving behind echoes of pain that reverberated through even the smallest lives. Yet here, in the shadow of a dying ship, he had found something precious, a life on the brink, desperate for warmth and hope. The knot of determination tightened in his chest. He would not let her slip away. With careful hands, he brought his personal medkit forward, checking the girl's vitals through the flickering screen. Her heart rate was dangerously low, her temperature perilously close to critical hypothermia. Time was slipping like sand through his fingers. Jalen worked quickly, administering a warming intravenous drip formulated for the cold-blooded species of the Outer Rim. He whispered softly, words that felt meaningless yet were the only comfort he could offer in the silence of the cold starship. Outside, the Zephyr's echo groaned, its broken systems protesting the sudden influx of power as Jalen rerouted emergency energy to stabilize the life support. Slowly, the temperature in the observation deck began to climb, frost retreating from surfaces as warmth pushed into the dead space. The girl's breathing steadied, tiny chest rising and falling with renewed vigor. Her lips, once blue and cracked, regained a hint of color. The faint luminescence in her veins pulsed more brightly, a living map of her fragile survival. Jalen glanced around the deck, taking in the wreckage and the silence of a ship that had seen better days. There was no sign of other survivors, only the endless emptiness of space reflected in shattered glass and the muted glow of distant stars. His heart clenched with the weight of responsibility. Who had left her here? Why had no one come for her sooner? There were no answers, only the stark reality that he was now her sole protector. Wrapping her securely in layers of his own clothing, Jalen rose, his grip firm but gentle. He knew he had to move quickly. The Endeavor was not designed for long-term care or deep space rescue. Yet, despite the risks, he could not leave her behind in this floating tomb. His mind was already plotting their next steps: how to reach the nearest inhabited system, how to find help, and how to ensure this tiny life would not be extinguished by the cold void. As he activated the comms system to send a distress signal, Jalen's thoughts lingered on the girl's wide, luminous eyes. There was a story behind them, a tale of loss, fear, and survival that deserved to be heard. For now, though, the priority was simple: warmth, safety, and hope. The fragile ember in her chest still burned, and he would shield it with everything he had. Chapter 2: Sanctuary in the Stars. The journey from the Zephyr's Echo to the bustling orbital station of Vantis Prime was long and fraught with uncertainty, but within the sturdy hull of the Endeavor, a fragile miracle began to take shape. Jalen monitored the girl closely, her tiny form wrapped tightly in thermal blankets, nestled against the artificial warmth of his ship's cabin. Each hour brought subtle improvements, color returning to her cheeks, strength gathering in her limbs, and the slow reclaiming of consciousness that had been stolen by cold and neglect. Vantis Prime was a sprawling hub of commerce and culture, a melting pot where countless species converged under towering arcologies and glowing spires. Yet amid the cacophony and clamor, Jalen knew their arrival would raise questions about a lone human returning with a vulnerable alien child found adrift in space. Bureaucracy and suspicion were inevitable, but he had no intention of letting the girl become another statistic lost in cold data files or orphaned by interstellar politics. Inside the medical bay of Vantis Prime's central hospital, Jalen stayed by the girl's side as skilled doctors and xenobiologists assessed her condition. They marveled at her resilience, her species' bioluminescent veins lighting up the sterile room like fragile threads of hope woven into darkness. She was fragile, yes, but her spirit had not been broken. Under the careful ministrations of advanced medicine and the protective watch of a human who refused to let her go, she began to heal. Days passed, and the girl's blue skin faded completely, replaced by the vibrant hues characteristic of her people. Her eyes fluttered open fully one morning, revealing irises shimmering like liquid starlight, curious and wary. She looked up at Jalen, recognition dawning slowly but surely in her gaze. It was the first real connection she had known in cycles, a bond forged in desperation and kindness. Jalen smiled gently, speaking softly in the few clithery phrases he had learned from scattered records and old explorers' journals. His voice was steady, reassuring. "You're safe now. You're not alone." Those words carried a weight far beyond their simple meaning. They were a promise, a vow that no matter how harsh the galaxy could be, he would be her warmth in the cold, her hope in the dark. As she began to recover, Jalen learned her name, Lyrie, a name whispered like a secret, fragile but strong. She spoke little at first, her voice a soft murmur carried on the edge of silence, but each day her words grew bolder. The stories she told were glimpses into a world lost, the lush jungles of Zinther Prime, the laughter of a family ripped apart by war, and the cold betrayal of those who cast her aside as a burden. Together, they faced the daunting reality ahead. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but in each other, they found a sanctuary. For Leary, the warmth of a human's compassion was a lifeline. For Jalen, the girl's survival was a rekindling of a purpose he thought long extinguished. In a universe indifferent to the weak, they forged a fragile alliance, a beacon against the darkness. And as the stars spun silently outside the medical bay's reinforced windows, a new journey began. One not just of survival, but of healing, trust, and the search for a home beyond the cold void. The days stretched on within the gleaming corridors of Vantis Prime's medical complex, a sprawling nexus of advanced technology and alien cultures, where beings from countless worlds converged seeking healing, refuge, or simply a moment's respite from the vastness of space. For Leary, the sterile environment was foreign and overwhelming. Bright lights that stung her eyes, humming machines that whispered secrets she could not understand, and the endless stream of unfamiliar faces that crowded around her with curious glances. Yet amid the clinical chill and alien voices, there was one constant warmth: Jalen. He remained by her side like a steadfast guardian, his presence a silent shield against the cacophony of strangers and the ghosts of her past. Each morning, she awoke wrapped in layers of soft fabric, her skin no longer a fragile shade of blue but a radiant coral pink that shimmered faintly beneath the medical scanners. Her body, once brittle and broken, now pulsed with life and tentative strength, the intricate bioluminescence of her veins a testament to the slow, miraculous recovery unfolding within her. The doctors marveled at her resilience, a biological enigma wrapped in fragile beauty. Her species, the Clithery, were rare in this corner of the galaxy, whispered about in exploration logs and trade routes, but seldom seen in person. Their physiology, adapted to humid jungle planets, struggled to withstand the harsh extremes of space, making Leary's survival all the more extraordinary. Jalen spent hours teaching her simple Earth words and phrases, his voice gentle and patient. He learned fragments of her language in return, piecing together stories from the words she could utter. Slowly, a bridge formed between them, a fragile thread woven from kindness, curiosity, and the deep human need to connect. Leary's eyes, once clouded by cold and fear, now flickered with a curious light, reflecting the stars beyond the hospital's expansive windows. In those moments, the weight of her ordeal seemed to lift, replaced by the tentative hope of something new. But healing was not just physical. Leary carried wounds deeper than frostbite or starvation, memories of betrayal and abandonment, the harsh judgment of her own people who had rejected her as weak and unworthy. The war that had shattered her homeworld left scars etched in her soul, invisible yet no less profound. Jalen understood this pain well. Loss and survival had shaped him as much as any battle scar. He shared his own story in broken phrases and patient gestures: the childhood lost to war, the loneliness of drifting between worlds, the stubborn hope that drove him to keep moving forward. In this shared vulnerability, they found strength. As Leary grew stronger, the hospital's xenobiologists began to probe the secrets hidden within her DNA, discovering unique adaptations that might hold the key to surviving the void's cold embrace. Her species' bioluminescence, for instance, was more than aesthetic. It was a biological signal of health and vitality, a complex communication system lost to all but her kind. There were also hints of genetic resilience traits that, if understood, could revolutionize medical care for countless species facing harsh environments. Leary, once discarded as too fragile to survive, now became a beacon of scientific hope. Yet beneath the sterile lights and scientific curiosity, a profound question loomed. What was to become of her now? The galaxy was not kind to orphans, especially those whose species teetered on the brink of extinction. Political factions vied for influence, refugee camps overflowed with survivors, and cold bureaucracies debated the fate of displaced children. Jalen's simple promise to keep her safe, to give her warmth and hope, was a defiant stand against a universe that often saw such lives as expendable. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of galactic politics and compassion. Jalen fought tirelessly for Leary's right to sanctuary, arguing with officials who saw her as a liability rather than a child deserving of protection. His voice, weathered but resolute, echoed through council chambers and bureaucratic offices. Slowly, allies emerged, doctors moved by her resilience, advocates passionate about preserving endangered species, and even members of her own distant people who saw in her survival a spark worth saving. Each night, as the twin moons of Vantis Prime rose beyond the city's towering spires, Leary and Jalen sat by the observation windows, gazing at the stars that had once seemed so distant and cold. She traced patterns in the constellations, her fingers glowing faintly in the dim light, and spoke softly of her home, the lush canopies, the vibrant life, the warmth of sunlit mornings. In those moments, the alien girl's voice was steady and clear, a melody woven from memory and hope. And Jalen, ever watchful, knew that this was only the beginning, a new chapter of survival and belonging that neither of them could have imagined in the cold silence of space. As the weeks passed, Leary's recovery blossomed in tandem with her growing trust in Jalen. The sterile, impersonal corridors of the hospital began to feel less like a cage and more like a refuge, a sanctuary born not just of technology, but of the human kindness that pulsed beneath the harsh exterior of the galactic frontier. Jalen's presence was a steady beacon for her, his quiet determination and unwavering care wrapped around her like a shield, protecting her from the cold remnants of abandonment and fear that still haunted her every waking moment. One evening, as the twin moons cast silver-blue light across the observation deck of the medical complex, Leary ventured a small smile. It was the first genuine smile in cycles, fragile but filled with a burgeoning hope that surprised even Jalen. They sat side by side, shoulders brushing lightly, watching the stars pulse in the velvet night beyond reinforced glass. The endless expanse of space, once a terrifying void, now felt like a vast canvas upon which new stories could be written, stories of healing, of second chances, of bonds forged in the crucible of hardship. The hospital staff had become intrigued by the girl's resilience and rapid improvement, their clinical fascination tempered by a growing affection. Doctors debated the best course to prepare Leary for life beyond the hospital's walls, while xenobiologists delved into the mysteries encoded in her DNA genetic markers that hinted at extraordinary potential for adaptation and survival in environments thought inhospitable to most life. Yet none of the scientific advancements could replace the simple truth that Leary's greatest strength was the fragile warmth of trust she had found in one human's arms. Jalen often found himself staring out into the depths of space, contemplating the uncertain future. The galaxy was vast, teeming with wonders and dangers alike, and he knew that Leary's survival was just the beginning of a journey fraught with unknowns. Where would she belong in a universe that had so readily discarded her? Could she ever find a home among stars so indifferent to a child's plight? But as he turned back to her glowing, vibrant eyes, filled with tentative hope and curiosity, he understood that hope itself was a powerful force, one that could bridge worlds and rewrite destinies. One morning, as light spilled softly through the tall windows, a visitor arrived, an envoy from the Clithery homeworld. The arrival stirred a whirlwind of emotions within Leary, a mixture of anticipation, fear, and the fragile hope of reconciliation. The envoy, a tall figure adorned in ceremonial robes that shimmered with bioluminescent threads, regarded her with a solemn gaze. Words were exchanged, formal, cautious, yet imbued with the weight of history and unspoken sorrow. The envoy spoke of their people's struggles, their loss, and a tentative willingness to embrace Leary as a symbol of survival and renewal. For Leary, the moment was bittersweet, a fragile tether to a past torn by war and betrayal, yet a possible anchor for a future she had only just begun to imagine. Jalen stood beside her, silently offering strength, knowing that whatever path lay ahead, they would face it together. The cold void that had once threatened to extinguish her life was now behind her, replaced by the warmth of human compassion and the faint light of new beginnings. Chapter 3: A New Dawn, a New Battle. The days following the envoy's visit were filled with cautious optimism, but also a growing awareness of the challenges yet to come. Leary's presence had stirred attention far beyond the medical bays and council chambers of Vantis Prime. News of the tiny survivor of the Zephyr's echo spread like wildfire across starports, among traders, and within the shadowed halls of political power. To some, she was a symbol of hope, a living testament to resilience and the possibility of unity among fractured worlds. To others, she was a pawn in a dangerous game, a fragile prize to be claimed or discarded as political tides shifted. Jalen understood all too well the complexity of galactic politics. Alliances formed and shattered in the blink of an eye. Trust, a rare and precious commodity. His mission had shifted. No longer was it simply about saving a life, but about protecting a child caught in the crossfire of ambitions far beyond her understanding. He resolved to be her shield, her guardian in a galaxy that had already shown her its harshest face. Meanwhile, Lyri's own transformation accelerated not just physically, but in spirit and resolve. No longer the frightened child curled against the cold, she began to grow into her role as a survivor and a symbol. Her bioluminescent glow brightened with every day, her eyes shining with a fierce intelligence and quiet strength that belied her size. The story she shared with Jalen became richer, more vivid, revealing glimpses of a world worth fighting for, a world she longed to see again, to heal alongside. But peace was elusive. Dark forces lurked beyond the light of Vantis Prime, remnants of the war that had shattered her homeworld still hungry for power and control. Shadows stirred in the galactic underworld, factions that saw Lyri's survival as a threat to their agendas. Rumors whispered of bounty hunters and mercenaries hired to capture her, of political operatives scheming to exploit her unique genetics for profit and power. The fragile sanctuary they had found was under siege, invisible but relentless. One night, as Jalen and Lyri prepared for rest, a warning came, silent alarms triggered by an attempted breach in the hospital's security systems. The sterile halls that had become their refuge erupted into controlled chaos as guards mobilized and emergency protocols activated. Jalen's heart pounded. The threat was real, immediate. He gathered Lyri close, shielding her from the storm that was about to descend. Their fight for survival was far from over. The sterile calm of the hospital shattered like glass under the sudden roar of alarms, echoing through the corridors with an urgency that sent chills down the spines of everyone within. Security teams mobilized swiftly, their footsteps pounding against metal floors as they sealed off sections of the complex. Yet, despite the swift response, Jalen's heart sank with the realization that this was no random breach. It was a calculated strike, aimed directly at the fragile sanctuary he had fought so hard to build around Lyri. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a crushing gravity. The little girl whose life he had saved was now a target once again. He scooped Lyri into his arms, the subtle glow of her bioluminescent veins pulsing rapidly as fear and adrenaline coursed through her. The vulnerability that had defined her early days had hardened into a fierce, instinctual will to survive. Her small hands gripped his jacket, eyes wide but resolute, reflecting the dim emergency lights flickering overhead. Jalen's mind raced, searching for a way out, a path to safety in a building designed for healing, not battle. Every corridor, every corner was now fraught with danger. Outside, the city of Vantis Prime hummed obliviously, its neon towers and bustling streets unaware of the storm unfolding within the medical bay's reinforced walls. But for Jalen and Lyri, the world had narrowed to the immediacy of survival. He moved quickly, navigating the labyrinthine halls with practiced precision, evading security drones compromised by intruders, and circumventing sealed doors that could mean imprisonment or death. The sounds of pursuit, a whisper of footsteps, the hum of energy weapons charging closed in relentlessly. The attackers were ruthless, a shadowy faction that thrived in the underbelly of galactic politics, hired mercenaries whose orders were clear. Capture the child with the unique genetic markers, no matter the cost. Their motives were murky, entangled in greed, fear, and the desperate desire to control the future of a species on the brink. To them, Lyri was not a child but a commodity, a key to unlocking biological secrets that could shift the balance of power. For Jalen, she was family, the embodiment of hope and defiance in a universe that often favored darkness. Cornered in a forgotten maintenance shaft, Jalen pressed himself against the cold metal wall, cradling Lyri protectively, as the pursuers closed in. The girl's breathing was steady now, but her eyes searched his face, silently asking for reassurance. Without hesitation, Jalen activated a compact device clipped to his belt, a pulse emitter designed to disrupt electronic tracking and temporarily blind surveillance systems. The sudden burst of electromagnetic interference threw their attackers into disarray, buying precious moments. With a surge of determination, Jalen bolted from their hiding place, weaving through corridors bathed in flickering red emergency lighting. Every step was a gamble, every breath a reminder of the stakes. He could not fail. The warmth he had fought to restore in Leary's tiny body was now a fragile flame that could not be extinguished. Drawing on every skill honed from years on the galactic frontier, he led them to an emergency escape pod hidden beneath the hospital complex, a relic from a past conflict, long forgotten but still functional. As the pod's hatch sealed shut, sealing them from the chaos outside, Jalen secured Leary in the small seat, her bioluminescence casting a soft glow against the cold metal. The pod shuddered violently as it launched into the void, a desperate gamble to escape the predators on their trail. Outside the viewport, Vantis Prime's glittering skyline receded rapidly, swallowed by the endless black of space. For hours, the silence of the pod was broken only by the steady hum of life support and Leary's soft breaths. Jalen kept a vigilant watch, eyes scanning sensors for signs of pursuit. He knew this was just the beginning of a longer battle, a war for survival that extended beyond physical danger into the realms of trust, belonging, and the fight for a future where a child like Leary could live free. The pod's navigation systems locked onto a distant moon in a quiet star system, a place far from the political intrigues and deadly factions of the core worlds. It was a refuge whispered about in old pilot tales, a sanctuary for the lost and the hunted. As the pod arced toward this new horizon, Jalen felt a cautious hope stir within him. The galaxy was vast, filled with shadows and light, cruelty and compassion. Here, in the cold silence of space, he and Leary would carve out their own story, a story of survival, resilience, and the warmth that could bloom even in the darkest void. The escape pod hurtled through the void, a tiny speck of hope against the vast, indifferent darkness. Inside, Jalen kept Leary close, her small body gradually relaxing as the immediate danger receded. Yet beneath the temporary safety, a storm of uncertainty brewed. Their pursuers were relentless, and the fragile sanctuary they sought was not guaranteed. Every system they passed was a reminder of the galaxy's complexity, its tangled web of alliances, betrayals, and cold calculations. Jalen studied the star charts, plotting a course toward the rumored sanctuary on the moon called Solarian Isolated Outpost, shrouded in mystery, home to those who had chosen exile over submission. It was the kind of place where the forgotten could disappear, where secrets could be kept safe from prying eyes. For Leary, it offered a chance not just to survive, but to belong, to heal wounds deeper than frostbite or war. As the pod began its slow descent toward Solara's surface, a fragile calm settled over them. Leary's fingers twined with Jalen's, a silent promise that they would face whatever came together. The stars outside gleamed with quiet promise, a new dawn waiting to break over the horizon of their shared journey. Chapter 4. Warmth Beyond the Cold. The moon Solera was a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of space. Its rocky terrain stretched beneath a pale sky, dotted with sparse vegetation that clung stubbornly to life amid the craters and dust. The air was thin but breathable, carrying a faint scent of minerals and distant rain. Here, far from the intrigues of star systems and the shadows of war, a new chapter awaited. Jalen guided the escape pod to a rough landing near a small settlement nestled within a valley, a cluster of sturdy domes and weathered buildings that spoke of resilience and quiet defiance. The inhabitants were a mix of exiles, scientists, and those who had fled the relentless tides of galactic politics. Among them were healers versed in ancient and alien arts, guardians who understood the fragile balance between technology and nature. As the pod's hatch hissed open, Leary stepped into the pale light, her glowing veins pulsing softly with renewed life. The chill was still present, but tempered by the gentle warmth of the sun that filtered through Solara's thin atmosphere. The settlement's residents watched quietly, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. Here, Leary was not just a survivor. She was a symbol, a living testament to endurance and the possibility of rebirth. Jalen moved with purpose, introducing Leary to those who would become their new family, the healers who would tend to her lingering wounds, the elders who respected her story, and the children who welcomed her with shy smiles. The sense of community was unfamiliar but comforting, a stark departure from the cold loneliness of the void. In the days that followed, Leary began to explore the fragile world around her, her bioluminescence brightening with each new discovery. She reveled in the simple pleasures, a soft breeze against her skin, the warm glow of a fire, the laughter of newfound friends. With Jalen's steady guidance, she learned to trust again, to dream of a future beyond survival. But even in this haven, shadows lingered. News of her escape had reached distant ears, and whispers of bounty hunters and mercenaries continued to haunt the edges of their fragile peace. Jalen and Leary knew their fight was far from over. Yet, here on Celera, with the warmth of community and the strength of their bond, they found the courage to face whatever darkness awaited. As the twin moons rose over the horizon, bathing the valley in silver light, Leary stood beside Jalen, her glowing form a beacon against the night. In her heart burned a new hope, a promise that no matter how cold the void had been, warmth and belonging were within reach. Together, they would forge a path forward, lighting the darkness with the enduring fire of life and love. The days on Celera unfolded like a quiet symphony of healing and rediscovery. Leary moved slowly at first, her small, fragile frame unaccustomed to the freedom of open space and the gentle caress of a sun that no longer felt like a distant memory but a tangible source of life. The settlement embraced her with tentative kindness, each face a new promise, each smile a balm to the wounds carved deep by betrayal and abandonment. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was not defined by her scars or her past, but by the potential shimmering beneath her luminous skin. Jalen became her constant companion and protector, a steady anchor in the new world that stretched before her. His hands, rough and calloused from years of labor, were gentle when brushing stray hair from her glowing brow or helping her steady her first hesitant steps beyond the safety of the settlement's domes. Their bond transcended the barriers of language and species. It was forged in shared hardship and nurtured by a simple, unwavering truth that life was worth fighting for. The healers of Celera, wise and patient, tended to Leary's body and spirit alike. They wove ancient techniques with cutting-edge medicine, coaxing vitality into every cell and soothing the lingering shadows that clung to her like frost. Slowly, strength grew in her limbs, color deepened in her cheeks, and the faint luminescent glow within her veins pulsed brighter, no longer a flicker, but a steady flame. The child who had once been abandoned in the cold void was blossoming into a symbol of resilience and renewal. But beyond the sanctuary's protective embrace, the galaxy remained vast and unpredictable. Reports filtered in, scattered whispers carried by passing traders, and encrypted transmissions intercepted by vigilant sentinels of those who sought to claim Leary for their own ends. Mercenaries backed by shadowy interests, bounty hunters fueled by greed, and factions hungry for control viewed her not as a child, but as a key to power. The sanctuary of Celera was a fragile shield against relentless tides, and Jalen knew they could not afford complacency. In response, the settlement's guardians honed their defenses, weaving technology and ancient wisdom into a network of protection. Drones patrolled the skies, and scouts kept watch on distant horizons. Jalen trained alongside them, his seasoned skills sharpening in preparation for the inevitable confrontation. But amidst the vigilance, they nurtured moments of peace, times when laughter echoed through the domes, when the scent of fresh bread mingled with the crisp mountain air, and when hope blossomed anew. One evening, as the twin moons bathed the valley in ethereal light, Leary stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking the settlement. Her eyes reflected the stars above, glowing softly with the luminescence that had become her signature. She breathed deeply, the cool air filling her lungs, carrying with it the promise of life beyond hardship. Memories of the cold void, the abandoned ship, and the biting frost were no longer chains but reminders of the journey that had brought her here. Jalen joined her silently, his presence a comforting weight beside her. Together, they watched the horizon where the first light of dawn began to chase away the shadows. In that moment, no words were needed. The warmth of their bond, the shared resilience of two souls forged in fire and frost, spoke volumes. Their future was uncertain, fraught with challenges yet to come, but it was theirs to shape. The galaxy might be vast and cold, but here on a small moon cradled in starlight they had found something precious: warmth, hope, and the unbreakable strength of belonging. As dawn's golden light spilled across the valley, Leary whispered, her voice steady and filled with quiet determination, "I am no longer alone." Jalen smiled, his heart swelling with pride and fierce protectiveness. "And you never will be." Together, beneath the endless sky, they stepped forward into the new day, a testament to the enduring power of warmth and hope in a universe too often shrouded in cold darkness. The settlement of Celera, perched on the edge of the galaxy's forgotten frontiers, became more than just a refuge. It transformed into a cradle of rebirth for Leary and those like her, lost to the tides of war and neglect. The days stretched into weeks, and the weeks into months, each passing moment weaving threads of healing and hope into the fabric of their lives. The once tiny girl, whose body had nearly turned to ice and whose spirit had been battered by abandonment, was blossoming into a symbol of resilience and possibility, her bioluminescent veins glowing with renewed strength that mirrored the light now kindling in her eyes. Jalen stood steadfast by her side, the protector who had plucked her from the icy grip of death and carried her toward warmth and life. Their bond, forged in the crucible of desperation and nurtured through shared struggle, grew into something profound, a family unbound by blood but bound by unwavering devotion. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of peace and vigilance, knowing that darkness still lurked beyond Solara's protective domes. But here, amidst the rugged landscapes and starlit nights, they found a sanctuary not just of safety, but of belonging. One crisp evening, as the settlement gathered beneath the twin moons to celebrate the festival of renewal, a tradition born from the ancient rites of Solara's earliest settlers, Leary took her place among the community. Her luminous form shone brightly in the gathering dusk, her smile radiant with the unspoken promise of a future reclaimed. Children danced around her, their laughter a melody that echoed through the valley, while elders shared tales of survival and courage. For the first time in her young life, Leary was not the fragile survivor, but a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of compassion and second chances. Jalen watched quietly from the sidelines, pride swelling within him as he observed the girl who had once been frozen to the brink of death, now thriving in a world that had once seemed impossibly cruel. He understood that their journey was far from over, that challenges would arise, threats would persist, and the scars of the past would never fully fade. But he also knew that with warmth and hope as their guides, no darkness could ever extinguish the light they had kindled together. Later that night, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Leary and Jalen stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and distant rain, a reminder of the lush world she had once called home. She reached out, her glowing fingers brushing against his weathered hand, a silent vow exchanged in the language of touch and trust. "We've come so far," she whispered, her voice steady and filled with quiet strength. "I was lost in the cold, but you gave me warmth. You gave me hope." Jalen smiled, his eyes reflecting the infinite night. "And you gave me purpose. Together, we'll face whatever comes. This is just the beginning." As the first light of dawn painted the horizon in hues of gold and violet, they turned back toward the settlement. A new home, a new family, and a future shaped not by fear or abandonment, but by the enduring power of connection. In a galaxy vast and often unforgiving, their story was a beacon, a reminder that even the tiniest, most fragile life could blaze with the fire of hope and the warmth of love. The cold had almost claimed her, but in the arms of a human who refused to let go, Leary had found what every soul seeks: a place to belong, a reason to fight, and the promise of tomorrow.